Hi, everyone. Welcome to our reading video for today. So I'm at a doctor's office today, so I have an appointment. So that's why I'm not here with you this afternoon. Today we will be starting lesson 7. Now, I know yesterday we were working on the Codex project and we were working on adding the Maya information to the chart. But we're going to pause for just a moment and go on to lesson 7. And then when I come back, we will be typing your information for the Mayan Codex part of the project. Okay, so this is lesson 7, Tenochtitlan, the center of the Aztec Empire. So we are now going to shift gears from Mayan to the Aztec Empire. And today we're going to be reading chapter number 5. And our learning goals are to determine the main ideas and key details in a text about the capital city of Tenochtitlan, and then to compare and contrast Maya and Aztec civilization. And then if we get time, we can do a little bit more work on our Codex project. Okay, so I'd like to go over the vocabulary for this story. Would you turn in your activity workbook to page 7.1? If you need to pause it for a moment, go ahead. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead on. So you should be on activity page 7.1. The first word you need to know is swampy. Swampy is an adjective which means resembling wet, spongy land, often partly covered with water. So it's like being in a swamp, thus the word swampy. The next word is habitable. Habitable is an adjective and it means fit to live in. So if our planet is habitable, it is fit to live in. If a place is inhabitable, it means it's not able to be lived in. The next word is marsh. It's a noun. It means soft, wet land, often overgrown with grasses. A marsh and a swamp are quite a bit alike, except a marsh has a little bit more grass in it. The next word is artificially. Artificially is an adverb, and it means in a way that does not exist in nature. The next word is emperor. Emperor is a noun. It means a ruler who has total control of a region. And then the next word is commoner, a noun, a person who is not part of the noble class. Commoners are very common, and they would do very common jobs in the city. The next word is peaked. Peaked is an adjective which means pointed, low, so like having a peak. Transport is the next word, is a verb to mean to carry from one place to another. Bustling is an adjective meaning busy with activity. And nourishment is a noun meaning food and other things that are needed to live and be healthy. So we're going to be, as we read, so this is what your page should have looked like. As we read chapter 5, we're going to be thinking about what factors led to the success of the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. So we're going to read about why Tenochtitlan was so successful. So would you please turn in your activity workbook to 7.2? And then what I'd like you to do is in your reader, go ahead and look at the table of contents. Look up chapter 5, Aztec City on the Water's Edge, right here. And then see what page number it starts on, page 32. Your job is to follow along while I read, and then I will pause and we'll be able to answer some of the questions on activity page 7.2. Aztec City on the water's edge. Have you ever heard of Mexico City? Did you know that this modern capital of Mexico was built on top of another city? If you visit Mexico City today, you can see archaeologists at work. They are busy uncovering the ancient city of Tenochtitlan. So Tenochtitlan is where Mexico City is now. Tenochtitlan was the capital of the Aztec Empire in the 1300s and 1400s. This empire existed more than 500 years after the Maya abandoned their great inland city-states. The ancestors of the people now known as the Aztec migrated from the north. By 1325 CE, they had settled in the Valley of Mexico. Other people had lived in Mexico's fertile valley for thousands of years before the Aztec arrived. Many groups were competing for space. The Aztec had several temporary homes, all of which they were eventually forced to leave. The land of the Aztec finally claimed may seem like an unlikely choice: two swampy islands in the middle of Lake Texcoco. So they had two swampy islands. So the first question I want you to think about just for a second is, what are some geographical features of the area where the Aztecs settled? So just skim and scan that last paragraph. It says the valley was fertile, which means it had really good soil. So that's one, good soil. Swampy islands existed in the middle of Lake Texcoco. So there was swampiness. They settled where Mexico City is today, in the Valley of Mexico, in the country of Mexico. So why do you think Tenochtitlan was such an important place? Think about that for just a moment. So one thing that comes to mind is in the second paragraph, it says Tenochtitlan was the capital of the Aztec Empire. So that's what made it so very important. So question number 1 on activity 7.2 says Tenochtitlan isn't on the map on page 32. Use the text and image on page 32 to guide you to labeling Tenochtitlan on the copy of your map on page 1.3. So if you go back to 1.3, we labeled Tenochtitlan, if you remember. So you can take a look at where we labeled Tenochtitlan, and it's this dot right here. That's Tenochtitlan. I think you already have that. And then the second part wanted you to add it to the timeline. So if you go to 1.1 and go to the timeline, the 1300s and 1400s is where we should put that Tenochtitlan was a empire there, or Aztec capital Tenochtitlan. They wanted us to put on there. Okay. Okay, so now let's return to the book, if I can. Okay. So now we're going to go on to the next page, which is page number 33. And it's titled Aztec Beginnings in Lake Texcoco. On the lake shore, the Aztec built mud huts and lived on food from the lake: frogs, fish, and algae. Algae are the plants that grow on top. It's kind of green. They hunted deer, rabbits, coyotes, armadillos, and snakes. They raised bees, turkeys, and ducks. They gathered grasshoppers and worms for food. The Aztec adapted to their swampy environment by creating habitable land from the lake bottom. They built gardens called chinampas in the middle of Lake Texcoco. They built bridges over the marshes and grew a variety of crops on the mainland as well. They cultivated corn, beans, squash, tomatoes, amaranth, and chilies. Members of the ruling class grew fruit trees in their small personal gardens. Crops grew throughout the year in Mesoamerica's tropical climate. As food supplies expanded, Tenochtitlan grew. So the food sources were vast, and they were very skilled with farming and gardening. Chinampas, gardens built from a lake bed. The Aztec perfected a technique for building gardens in Lake Texcoco. First, they scooped up mud from the bottom of the shallow lake. Then they piled layers of mud and aquatic plants on top of one another. They used reed posts to anchor these rectangular gardens to the lake floor. They planted willow trees along the border to help hold the artificially filled lakeshore in place. A series of canals crossed the Chinampas, providing a year-round source of water for crops. Fish and other aquatic wildlife lived in the canals and were another source of food. So if you see here in the picture, this is the crisscross of the canals in the Chinampas. So they have a very different way of farming than our Mayans that we used. So now the author tells us that two swampy islands in the middle of Lake Texcoco may seem like an unlikely choice, but in what way did this turn out to be the perfect choice for placing a settlement? Think about it for a moment. So there are lots of wildlife in the swamp to hunt, and they also built gardens and grew crops, and they were able to grow crops throughout the year. So now, would you go to question number 2 of page 7.2? So go back to activity page 7.2. It says, based on the information from the text, use the numbers 1 through 5 to put the following statements about Chinampas in the correct order to show how they were built. Use 1 for the first step. So what I'm going to do is I'll read all 4 of your choices, and then I will reread the steps, and then maybe that'll help you put the numbers where they should be. So the first one says the Aztec people piled layers of mud and aquatic plants on top of one another. The second sentence says fish and other aquatic life in the canals provided a source of food. The third one says reed posts were used to anchor the gardens to the lake floor. There should be an O there. Then mud scooped up from the bottom of the lake. And then willow trees were planted along the borders to help hold the newly created land in place. And the page number is 33. So that I know you can already put 33 there. Okay, so let me read the steps to you. I'm reading in this colored section here on page 33. The Aztec perfected a technique for building gardens in Lake Texcoco. First, they scooped up mud from the bottom of the shallow lake. Find it and label it 1. Then they piled layers of mud and aquatic plants on top of one another. That would be 2. Then they used reed posts to anchor these rectangular gardens to the lake floor. That is 3. Then they planted willow trees along the borders to help hold the artificially filled lakeshore in place. That would be 5. A series of canals crossed the Chinampas, providing a year-round source of water for the crops. Fish and other aquatic life lived in the canals and were another source of food. So hopefully you got all 5. Okay, so now let's return to the book. And would you turn to Punu? Okay. I got to the right page. Would you turn to pages 34 and 35? Tenochtitlan, a well-planned city. Tenochtitlan was laid out on a grid. Its streets and canals formed a pattern of squares. Its religious and ceremonial center was located at the heart of the city. This sacred precinct or period temple complex was much larger than those at the Maya centers. Stone walls carved with serpents surrounded the precinct. The great temple or Templo Mayor dominated the space inside the walls. On top of Templo Mayor, the Aztec built shrines to honor their two most important gods. One shrine was dedicated to, let me see how to pronounce that, Huitzilopochtli. That was hard. And I even lost my spot. The sun god. The other honored Tlaloc, the rain god. Social classes determined where people lived. Oh, that's the same as in the Maya. How they dressed and how they earned a living. Aztec priests lived in palaces within the sacred precinct. Just outside the sacred precinct, the emperor and members of the noble class built carved stone palaces and beautiful gardens. Beyond its city center, Tenochtitlan was divided into 4 sections or quadrants. Each quadrant was divided into 20 Copulan or districts. Each one by itself, called a Copuli, had its own farm, marketplace, and school. Commoners, including merchants, artisans, which are people that do art, and farmers, lived together in the Copulan. They built their houses of sun-dried clay bricks called adobe. These one-story houses often had peaked thatch roofs. Others had flat earthen roofs used for planting gardens. Many people also built domed mud huts outside their homes. These huts were used as sweat baths. The Aztec lit fires outside the huts to warm the walls. They entered the sweat baths once the inside walls became hot. They threw water against the heated walls, producing steam. The effect was similar to modern-day steam baths and saunas. And this caption says, at Tenochtitlan, many people were employed to sweep the streets and get rid of garbage. Each neighborhood had public toilets. So they even thought of that. That's how organized they were. So now, the question I have for this page is, how were the religious and ceremonial centers in Tenochtitlan different from the Mayan centers? So take a look and skim and scan. The answer is Tenochtitlan's pyramid temple complexes were much larger than the pyramid temple complexes of the Maya. So Tenochtitlan's were really big, Maya's were rather small. Okay. So now, would you turn to our next page, which is page number 36. Oh no, why does it do that? Okay, page 36. It's called Causeways, Aqueducts, and Marketplaces. Lake Texcoco contains salt water. Providing fresh water for the population of Tenochtitlan was a challenge. The Aztec used sand, dirt, rocks, and wooden stakes to build 3 wide causeways. Causeways are pieces of land in between the waters. Each causeway was about 2.5 miles long. These wide raised roads connected the city to natural springs on the mainland. Each causeway supported an aqueduct. Aqueducts are structures that bring water to places. Oh, a structure built to carry water. The aqueduct consisted of 2 clay pipes. One transported fresh water from the springs into Tenochtitlan for drinking and bathing. The second pipe was a spare, used only when the first pipe needed cleaning. Bustling marketplaces filled Tenochtitlan and other cities. At the Grand Market in nearby Tlatelolco, thousands of people traded daily for goods such as clothing, food, and pottery. Merchants brought goods to exchange from all over central Mexico and even beyond. So, Tenochtitlan was built on a lake and surrounded by water. Why was it necessary to have aqueducts? Kind of goes along with our science too. Tenochtitlan was surrounded by salt water, and the aqueducts brought fresh water from the mainland. And obviously, fresh water is used for drinking and cleaning and that sort of thing. Okay, so now would you turn to page 38, Gods and Goddesses and Sacrifices? Like the Maya, here, well, Like the Maya, the Aztec believed in multiple gods and goddesses. They believed in gods of nature, gods of health, and gods of war. The Aztec believed that the sun god, Huitzilopochtli, could not make his daily journey from east to west without nourishment. They believed that the sun would not rise and the world would end if they did not feed the god. The Aztec believed that the gods, humans, and nature worked together. The Aztec lived in a region surrounded by volcanic mountains. It was an area where earthquakes were likely to occur. They believed that the gods controlled these forces of nature. If the people angered the gods might rattle the earth or release hot lava from the mountains. So like the Maya, the Aztec made sacrifices to the gods. Many human sacrifices took place at the Temple Mayor inside the sacred precinct. At the base of the temple steps, the Aztec built a rectangular ball court. The object of the ball game calls, let's see how they pronounce it, Ulumalitli, was to pass a rubber ball through a stone ring. Doesn't that sound a lot like the Maya game of Pakatak? Like Pakatak, the Aztec ball game was sometimes played as part of a religious ritual. Sometimes players were sacrificed at the end of the game. Oh no. Not far from the court at Tenochtitlan, archaeologists unearthed evidence of these sacrifices. Oh no. Okay, let's go to page 39. Everyday life in the Aztec Empire. The Aztec valued education. Boys went to different schools depending on their social status. Noble boys were taught by priests in the temples. They learned to read and write and trained to be future leaders. In addition, noble boys learned about religion, medicine, law, and astronomy. Boys from lower social ranks attended schools where they learned a trade, such as building roads or repairing temples. From an early age, all boys trained for battle. Girls were educated separately. They learned the art of cooking, sewing, and weaving. And there we have two pictures, the boy being trained for battle and the girl learning to weave. Women and girls used fibers from both cotton and maguey cactus plants to weave beautiful cloth. Commoners and nobles alike wore bright and colorful fabrics dyed with natural plant dyes. Clothing styles varied throughout the Aztec Empire, but all clothing was loose and simple. Men and boys wore loincloths and draped themselves in triangular cloaks. Women and girls wore long skirts and sleeveless blouses. Noble men and women preferred clothes made of cotton and added gold, feathers, and fur. Necklaces, earrings, and bracelets made of precious gems decorated their bodies. So everyone was trained for something a little bit different. Boys and girls had jobs, even the different noble classes had different jobs. So let's go on to number 3, part A. Okay, so we need to go back to page 34 for part A. It says in paragraph 1 on page 34, what is the meaning of the word shrine? So let me read that there. Tenochtitlan was laid out on a grid. Its streets and canals formed a pattern of squares. Its religious and ceremonial center was located at the heart of the city. This sacred precinct or pyramid temple complex was much larger than those at the Maya centers. Stone walls carved with serpents surrounded the precinct. The great temple or Templo Mayor dominated the space inside the walls. On top of Templo Mayor, the Aztec built shrines to honor their two most important gods. One shrine was dedicated to the sun god. The other shrine was dedicated to the rain god. So is that A, the top of part of an important building, B, a pyramid temple complex, C, a sacred place related to one's religious beliefs, or D, the center of the city? Mark your choice now. Now that you've marked your choice, go on to part B. Which phrase best helps the reader determine the meaning of the word shrine? Is it A, stone walls carved with serpents, B, to honor their two most important gods, C, located at the heart of the city, or D, dominate the space within the walls? Circle your answer and you should write page 34 for this one. So now we can go back to where we were at the end of the book, where we're talking about the different jobs. And this, well, actually, this has to do with cause and effect. Cause is the what happened, no, why it happened. The effect is the what happened. The cause is why it happened. And remember, you can put the word because before it. So the effect is each quadrant of Tenochtitlan had a school. Why? Because the Aztec created habitable land from the lake bed. Because people frequently went to the marketplaces. Because the Aztec valued education for their children. Because the Aztec farmers built chinampas. Because causeways were constructed, or because aqueducts were built on the causeways. So think about school and education. Which cause has to do with that? B, the city grew in size much larger than its beginnings on two swampy islands. Why? Because the Aztec created habitable land from the lake bed. Because people frequently went to the marketplaces, because the Aztec valued education for their children, because the Aztec farmers built chinampas, because causeways were constructed, or because aqueducts were built on the causeways. Then C, people could travel to and from the mainland. Why? Because the Aztec created habitable land from the lake bed, because people frequently went to the marketplaces, because the Aztec valued education for their children, because the Aztec farmers built chinampas, because causeways were constructed, or because aqueducts were built on the causeways. Okay, people in the middle of the salty lake had access to fresh water. What was the reason for that? Farmers could produce a variety of crops. Find the answer for that. And finally, there were many opportunities for trade between other cities and regions. Now, challenge. If you're ready for a challenge, use your writing journal to answer this question. Remember your composition books that you have there? Okay. In what ways were the Aztec like the Maya? In what ways were they different? Include information from the text in your answer. You may wish to reread sections of chapters 1, 2, and 3 to include details from the text in your answers. Okay, so what I would like to do now, so pause the video for a moment, because I would like to go over your answers right now. So let me just scroll down. Hopefully you're not getting too dizzy. I went too far. Okay, so let's go back to 7.2. And this is what you should have done for the order for number 2. Number 1 would be the mud was scooped up from the bottom of the lake. This is how they made the chimpanas. 2, the Aztec people piled layers of mud and aquatic plants on top of each other. 3, reed posts were used to anchor the gardens to the lake floor. 4, willow trees were planted along the borders to help hold the newly created land in place. And finally, 5, fish and other aquatic life in the canals provided a source of food. Please change them if you didn't get them right. Then number 3, a shrine is C, a sacred place related to one's religious beliefs. And then part B, the phrase that helps you determine the meaning of shrine is B, to honor their two most important gods. Lastly, we're going to put the cause and effects together. So it should be B, F, A, E, C, D, and there are 3 pages you found these answers on. Now I'm going to read it so that it makes sense and you can see how it fits together. Okay, the first one is B. Because the Aztec created habitable land from the lake bed, the city grew in size much larger than its beginnings on two swampy islands. See, that makes sense. Okay, next one. Because people frequently went to the marketplaces, F, there were many opportunities for trade between other cities and regions. Next one. Because the Aztec valued education for their children, each quadrant of Tenochtitlan had a school. Next one. Because the Aztec farmers built chinampas, farmers could produce a variety of crops. Next one. Because causeways were constructed, people could travel to and from the mainland. And last one. Because aqueducts were built on the causeways, people in the middle of a salty lake had access to fresh water. And we'll share together if you ended up doing the challenge. Now, with the rest of your time, what I want you to do is give yourself some time to work on your IXLs for this week. You can also silent read in Mayan and take some AR quizzes. And that way you will be right on track and not missing anything. Okay, I missed you today, and I will see you tomorrow. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.